The 517th Parachute Regimental Combat Team was part of the greatest generation of soldiers to fight during World War II. One of only two independent combat teams, they had one purpose: preserve freedom for all. Handpicked and trained for special operations, their final mission was part of an epic battle to stop Hitler's last desperate charge. They joined as young, adventurous enthusiasts and left wise, hardened men. This, then, is their story.
Signed a piece of paper saying I would jump out of a moving aircraft and land via parachute. Very exciting.
It was kind of like Disneyland, you know. It was fun to ride that cable down, fall into sawdust, and, you know. That's why I went into paratroops.
From the very outset, they said, you are going to be the finest troops in the United States Army. You can beat anybody, any enemy that you can handle. There won't be any that you can't take care of.
In our history of battle, we always made our mission. We were always successful. Some were very difficult, some were easier, but we were used to covering ground, being successful.
As America entered World War II, new strategies for defense were employed. Technological and equipment development allowed men to jump into targeted hotspots with exacting precision. Considered some of the most difficult and risky missions, these soldiers would parachute into combat, carrying everything they needed on their backs: weapons, food, water, and an objective. Richard Seitz first witnessed this new discipline during basic training, and he was mesmerized.
About 1940, I was at Fort Benning taking the basic officer course, and at that exact time, the parachute test platoon was just organized and just beginning their jumps. And often I saw them jump, and I thought, by damn, I'd like to try that.
Seitz volunteered for the parachute troop and was sent to Fort Benning, Georgia for training. He was later sent to Camp Toccoa for specialized recruitment and selection, a testament to just how important this unit would become.
I interviewed each man that came in, and I had the option of turning him down. We interviewed some 3,000 men to get 800.
Get to Toccoa, and I looked out of the window, and it was all red clay. I said, Ed, my God, they're killing them right off the train here. It's a lot of blood mixed in with that sand.
The only blood came from the blood and gut speech given by experienced trainers like Boom Boom Alicki, designed to scare off the timid. If that didn't work, the next challenge was to jump off a 34-foot tower, and if you refused, you were assigned to go elsewhere.
I remember very well the interview I had with Colonel Seitz, and his question was, why did you choose the paratroops? And I said, I want to be in paratroops because I want to be in the best unit there was.
I was so impressed with them. They were truly Jack Armstrong's All-American. We said, we're not only looking for brawn, we're looking for heart.
While the artillery and engineers moved to Camp McCall, the infantry began basic training.
I know we went to bed at night wearing our shorts and our boots, because in the morning, before dawn, we just rolled down and started running.
Either in the afternoon you ran up to Currahee, or you had what we called a pleasure run of about 4 miles. But that was a routine. And we did it, the weather was hot as hell at Toccoa. So we did all of our training in shorts and boots. God, the troops they were bronze, all real suntanned and magnificent physical character.
They worked us from dawn till dark, physical exercise, running up and down Mount Currahee, taking weapons with us. Sometimes one would drop out, we pick him up and take him. The 517th broke every record of any parachute regiment that progressed through Toccoa.
From Toccoa, the men went to Fort Benning, Georgia for jump school. They trained under Colonel Lewis Walsh, a young aggressive commander who had witnessed combat under atrocious conditions. Determined to prepare his unit to survive and win under any circumstances, he set extremely high standards.
We went from McCall down to Benning as a unit and took basic parachute training. The men said it's a piece of cake because they were in such damn good shape, cocky as hell. And they got their induction at Toccoa and then got their basic training together and then went to jump school together. That's really molding them pretty close. We knew we were a cut above the rest of the Army, and we made every effort to show it, socially, professionally.
In the winter of 1943, the unit was sent north for a practice run called the Tennessee Maneuvers. This exercise was the final test to be considered combat ready. The terrain perfectly emulated parts of Europe, where they would soon find themselves in the real war.
Lots of marching, night and day, mud up to your ass. And we were suddenly pulled out of the 17th Airborne, and that's when we became a separate combat team.
The independent combat team was made up of the 517th Parachute Infantry Regiment, the 460th Parachute Field Artillery Battalion, and the 596th Airborne Engineer Company, all parachute jumpers.
We went back to McCall in preparation for shipment overseas. Finally, we're going to get into this. Yeah, we'd had a good year of training, individual and unit training. And we'd made a couple mass jumps during that training. And Lou Walsh was he was a magnificent trainer and tough, sometimes mean, but he was good.
Walsh was replaced by Colonel Graves because of his attitude and high demand, but many credit his stringent training as the difference between life and death once on the front line. In March of 1943, Colonel Graves took command of the trooper team and made final preparations for the boat ride to Italy.
We were on the Santa Rosa, which had been an Italian cruise ship. We did have a company of wax, which did, provide good, clean fun, I think.
The men gave little thought to the dark days ahead. After 2 weeks of smooth sailing and light-hearted fun, the big ship arrived at the Bay of Naples. Italy, trial by fire. Soon the fun would be over, and the reality of battle began. Within a matter of weeks, they became a well-seasoned combat team fighting in rough terrain.
We landed over the beach, and except for some long-range artillery fire, there was no opposition. The idea of us landing there was to get behind the Germans.
I remember getting off the LCI and we hadn't got a couple of 100 yards when a massive explosion occurred partway up. It didn't hit anybody, landed in an open field, but that was our opening crescendo of wow.
Lieutenant West came back and he said, I want everybody to dig in because the Germans have the high ground, they can see us, and we're probably going to be shelled before the evening's over. And we hadn't dug in good when here come the incoming round. I'll never forget those because all of a sudden you realize that they were trying to kill you.
General Zase, who became a four-star general, had the 3rd Battalion. Dick Seitz had the 2nd Battalion. And Bill Boyle had the 1st Battalion. Bill Boyle was a real gung-ho soldier, a very brave man, a very aggressive individual when it came to combat. Bill was up in the front line all the time. In fact, he was leading the battalion the morning that we got into combat. We were in a loose approach march, and a machine gun had set up behind this stone wall. Well, Bill Boyle and his radio operator and his runner came around on the side and were pinned down by that machine gun. So I opened fire on the machine gun. I knocked out the gunner. I went down then and took the machine gun, and I opened up with the machine gun. I sent Shorty back with the prisoners. So they were the first prisoners captured by the 517.
I learned a lot that first day, that you could get some people hurt. But we were all charged up. I didn't have any trouble getting the battalion to move. I mean, we were ready.
Combat losses had been relatively low during the brief period in action, but still total 129, including 17 killed. The 517th had been sent to Italy in response to a request for airborne troops for the invasion of southern France. It was to be a secondary attack to draw German forces away from Overlord, the main landing. Vital combat experience had been gained that would see them through the hardest times yet to come. Part of the 1st Airborne Task Force, the 517th would be one of only 3 infantry divisions to invade southern France. Their mission was to drop more than 5,000 paratroopers in order to protect the army arriving from the Mediterranean. The army was there to destroy German resistance up through the Rhone Valley. More than 100 miles long, Operation Dragoon was the last large-scale night jump of World War II.
We didn't know whether it would be a piece of cake or not. It was the poorest kept secret in the damn world. Everybody, it seemed, in Rome knew about it. Axis Sally continually mentioned it on her program.
Hello, fellas. Hello, you men from a country where selfishness and greed on the part of many exists at the expense.
And she said, welcome 517th to Italy. We see you've got your crew cut. Yeah, we cut our hair back to burr cut. We see you're all ready to go for the invasion of southern France. And we want you to know that you don't have to worry about finding the drop zone because we're going to light it up for you. And that was always encouraging. They knew more about where we were going, Burl and Sal did, than we knew ourselves.
It was a lot of excitement, personal excitement. We were feeling now we were going to do what we were trained to do.
We'd been up all day, and so we were up most of the night also, getting ready for the jump, get the equipment ready, get parachutes ready. It's all dark now, and it's getting around midnight, something like that. And there were some ladies, we called them gray ladies, and they were women about my mother's age and a little older. And they were serving coffee and donuts. And I began to notice a few tears in their eyes. Now I know why.
We didn't board the airplanes until about 2 o'clock. But you know, get ready to wait. So I remember at the departure airfield, most of the troops were sacked out. They were bushed.
I was wide awake the whole way. The door was off and you could see out. I was sitting just opposite the door, and I could see the water, the ocean when we were flying over the Mediterranean, and I couldn't believe that some of the guys would go to sleep.
We didn't hardly say a word to each other until we were ready to jump. And then it was not anything to talk about, it was just doing the normal things like stand up, hook up, and check the equipment in front of you.
I was going to be the first guy out, and I'm going to be riding in the door, you know. Lead man in the lead airplane of the 517th. And I was concerned about the damn thing, you know. As we hit landfall, I could see the tracers coming up.
4:32 a.m., that's 0432, 15 August 1944. The red light is on, that's the get ready light. And I'm standing in the door, I'm leading our headquarters group out. That was my headquarters. And I'm standing in the door and I looked at my watch and we were 2 minutes late. We were supposed to be at 0430 over the drop zone.
Plane is noisy and we were doing all kinds of things, smoking like crazy, of course. And even one of the guys who never did smoke before was smoking. When finally the time came to jump, the green light, out we went. The vivid memory there is the sudden silence. The engine gone away from us. We were floating down.
We jumped at a low altitude. I had no idea where we were, and I found out that the aircraft didn't know where we were either. But I looked down, and then I'm listening. It's very quiet, and I can hear waves crashing over the rocks.
If you were over the water, you were gone. That was it. There was no way you could come out in time. You just go to the bottom like a rock.
And then there was a blanket of fog that obscured everything.
Looked like the ocean. It was fog, solid fog.
And so I'm taking off my equipment as much as I could, prepared to do one of these things where we do a water landing and try to get away from the chute.
I remember hitting the ground and I'm thinking, oh boy, I'm all here. I took inventory. I mean, with a real whop. And I took inventory physically, and I didn't break anything. I'm not spraying. I look around, no German with a bayonet ready to stab me. And I didn't see a soul anywhere.
I landed in an olive grove. I got on the ground, my white chute stayed in the tree, and I got out of my harness, had to put my M1 back together, and looked up at that white parachute, and I said, you know, when it gets daylight, every German in France is going to see that white parachute. Except when it got daylight, there were thousands of white parachutes all over the place. And then I met one of my buddies. Then we met two medics, and I said, isn't this great? 4 guys with 2 rifles. And then a little later on, we met the Brits. And you know what they were doing? Don't laugh, they were making tea. He said, hey, Yank, would you like a spot of tea?
I was alone. That was scary. And lo and behold, I heard some people talking. And then I said, hey, I'm American, you know. And I heard them. The thing that was scary on top of that, I heard the clicks of the M1. Safeties come off. I said, hey, don't shoot, I'm an American. I can remember that this day.
And I'm walking around at dark, and I've seen fellas all over the place. Even though it's dark, you see something. And I met one fellow who was standing there, and he had a Tommy gun, and he was shaking. And he says, you know what they did? They dropped us in the wrong place. My one comfort there was that there was someone a little more afraid than I was.
Well, it was dark, and I lit at a tree, and I didn't know how far I was off the ground, but I knew I wasn't going to hang there for very long. My first thought was, I'm going to be captured. And my second thought was, if I'm going to be captured, I'm going to eat those 3 candy bars before I get captured. So I sat right there in the dark and ate 3 candy bars.
Suddenly I hit the ground, and I could hear gunfire off in the distance, and I thought, well, we're here.
Though everyone jumped, many did not land on their drop zone due to fog. Scattered over 25 miles, the 517th would have to somehow find one another amidst enemy fire on the ground to complete their first mission.
We missed our field by about 25 miles. So they had a sand table set up, you know, and they said, okay, now when you land, look up and see which way the planes are going. And then you go to the left of this field and follow a ravine up to a little knoll, and we're going to get together and reform up there.
I was lucky, I had a good landing. Only about 5 miles from where I was supposed to be.
I ended up dropping into a bush grape orchard in the middle of a German command post, along with 8 other soldiers. I wondered why and how I could survive all that fire and not get hit, but I finally realized that I was low enough and the grapes were taking the velocity out of all of that fire, and all they were doing is mowing grapes, and the grape leaves were falling down on me.
The drop zone was about 2 miles west of Lemuy, and we were about half a mile east of Lemuy. Even though we were 2 minutes late, we never got right on the DZ, but we weren't too far away.
But it took me probably that day, maybe into the next day, before we joined up with the rest of the troops in Lemuy. Yeah.
Some officers found a Frenchman who was going to tell them where we were. Well, nobody told me. I didn't find out until a long time afterwards.
I didn't have any idea where we were until I moved. We landed about 4:30 in the morning. It was dark. And I moved out to a blacktop road. And that's the first time I knew exactly where I was. I remember seeing this little French marker that said, Le Mouille, 6 kilometers. That morning, we started getting some sporadic fire from Germans who were confused as hell. I mean, they didn't know, whether there were 100,000 paratroopers or where they dropped. They were more confused than we were. But we did that morning. We got sporadic fire from various small groups of Germans as we would be marching down these various roads. And then D+1, we really got a lot of action. It was the season when the grapes were on the vineyard. I remember these soldiers rushing out there and getting a helmet full of grapes and rushing back at it, and the Germans would shoot like hell. But these troops still, and I'd tell them, God damn it, keep your head down. But about that time, some damn trooper would rush out there, get a handful of grapes, and come back. What a bunch of guys.
We were getting across a valley filled with grapevines. Then we encountered some machine gun and sniper fire. It was coming from a slight hill in front of us. As we got closer, the fire started falling off, and by the time we got up to the building, there was no fire. And we could hear movement inside the building. So I held up a grenade, and he shook his head, so I popped a grenade and threw it in the building, and it went off. So we sat there and listened for a few minutes. We're hearing more noise, and he's about to throw another grenade in, and all of a sudden a chicken walked out with about 5 or 6 little chickens. And their feathers were all ruffled up and backwards. And I don't think we killed a chicken. And so we jumped in the building, and we didn't kill any Germans because they were all gone. And it was a wine cellar. And the building was full of wine bottles, and we didn't kill any chickens, we didn't kill any Germans, and we didn't break a bottle of wine in there.
On the way to the command post, Roberts and his sergeant escaped the German command post and later ran into British paratroopers. Together, they devised a plan to capture the compound.
There were 9 men of 3 groups which ran to the wall as hard as they could go and threw the gammon grenades over, and then the man stood tall against the wall, the next man kneeled down, and the third man got down his knees, and then all the rest of us ran up over their backs and up over the wall and dropped into that compound. They were running their Tommy guns full tilt all the time, just absolutely it, but they stayed in formation so that they wouldn't shoot each other. In about 10 minutes, there were 40 dead and 40 prisoners out of all of that black smoke. I began to think that maybe I would survive, but at that time, I really thought I was dead.
That afternoon in particular, we were getting mortared by the enemy and getting a lot of machine gun fire. Bill Boyle and some of his people were under heavy German fire, and they were more or less pinned down, and I was told, take my battalion and go down and capture the town and relieve Boyle and his people.
On day 2 of Operation Dragoon, the entire combat team fought together as a regiment for the first time. They successfully took Les Arcs and cleared a path for the Army to continue to move north.
The villagers are coming out, and then of course it's Liberation. And so they're giving us, I didn't drink any wine at that point, but as we got into the village, The villagers are coming out with wine and some clear liquid which looked like and tasted like 7-Up. And after the first bottle, I'm having trouble focusing my eyes.
We made contact with the over the beach landing people on D+3. So our mission was over as far as preventing the Germans reinforcing.
Operation Dragoon was a remarkable performance, considered by military historians as the most successful of the war. The 517th's next mission was to protect the eastern flank of the 7th Army as it rushed up the Rhone Valley. The team's march was mostly on foot. With only the clothes they jumped with, they battled on for another 50 miles through the Maritime Alps. Encountering a mix of skirmishes and liberation celebrations, in less than a week, they reached France's Var River.
The Germans were withdrawing, but they put up a pretty good fight. But we'd attack them, they'd withdraw, we'd seize the objective, and that continued until we got to the Var River. It looked like an impossible situation. Here you have the Germans holding this very high ground, 15 or 2,000 feet high, on the other side of the Var River. Good observation on us. The bridge is blown. What is usable of the bridge is under constant fire from the enemy, artillery fire and small arms fire. The staff and I came up with this idea, let's try and get one company, sneak one company across that river, lie in wait till late daylight, and attack La Roquette from the rear.
A large French man led us down a mountain side, literally a big cliff or mountain or whatever we want to call it, into the Var River. And we were to walk across that river at about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. It doesn't matter, it's very dark. At least one man washed down the river, but we rescued him.
They came up on the other side, moved up into a camouflage, a secure position, got their equipment in order, made a plan, went up at daybreak,
and started toward La Roquette. And on the way we saw 2 Germans on a motorcycle.
They hit a German motorcycle courier.
Unfortunately, I think now that we killed them and took from them several items of military intelligence, what they were planning to do to us. So it was an unfortunate action, but it proved profitable. Right. And they moved on into the town.
And from then on, they let the Germans have it. They completely surprised the Germans.
We started firing first right into these Germans who were lying there in the courtyard. We chased them out of there and captured somewhere between 100 and 150, I would say. And I know we killed at least 17.
It was the most daring operation, the 517th. Small scale, but when you capture 190 or whatever number of prisoners and kill a couple dozen, you know, that's a pretty good operation.
The daring mission allowed the rest of the regiment to cross the Var safely and continue up the Maritime Alps.
By the time we'd been in those mountains, and we were there 93 days, I think it is, by the time the first 30 days were over, we'd worn our clothing out. We'd worn our boots out. We were constantly in need of water.
Troops moving like a bunch of goats, you know, up those side of those mountains. The Germans had blown all the damn roads.
Their final destination was the Col de Bras-Saspel region. The mountain ranges surrounding the area control the roads leading to Italy. These roads were the main supply route for the Germans and vitally important to them.
Each day they would blow us off the top of the mountain and we would retreat back. This doesn't make a whole lot of sense. We're fighting for that thing. We lose it every day, but the Germans had to hold it because once we occupied that mountaintop and the others all the way up to Paracava, which is quite a ways to the north, and the other forts, why we then held the high ground and the observation of those forts.
Basically, it was two mountain ridges, okay? They shot at us, we shot at them, mortars mainly.
One mortar came within maybe 4 or 5 feet from me, and it didn't go off. It just covered me with dirt. That's something to be thankful for. I thank that German worker for saving my life.
Germans defended the area by using forts built in World War I.
Anytime you'd reach a ridge or a trail or come down a road, those forts had they'd zeroed the weapons in on every crossroad, every culvert, everything that was there, and they'd done that probably in World War I.
It seemed like most of my time trying to get up to the top of Fort Barbanet and Fort Agnes. In the daytime, they could spot you. At night, they had booby traps set for you. You could only take 3 men with you, hoping not to get spotted. And I tried 8 times before I finally made it to the top. And there was only about 4 Germans up there, so they was no problem. Kill them. Shot them. Grenaded 2 of them.
And those forts would open up on us almost with a time sequence. If it was 7:27, you had better had your breakfast, your rations, and eaten them because that's when they're going to open up.
They would pick off anything that was around in there, and unfortunately when the motorcycle messenger boy didn't make it through there, and so I got his job. But I knew how they got him, and I decided that they weren't going to get me that way, and so I would stop at the edge of the woods and watch for their pattern of fire. When it eased a little bit, I'd crouch out on that motorcycle, turn it wide open, and scream across that straight road, get back into cover. My job then was to get up and down those switchbacks in the Maritime Alps down to Nice, where our high command was, and take messages and reports to them. As I was going up and down there, I came across a civilian, Frenchman, who was riding a bicycle, and he spoke a little English, and he indicated that he was trying to get food for his family. I decided then that my K rations in my pack I wasn't that hungry, and I gave them to him. So I did that a few times. And as a result of that, he invited me to his flat in Nice, and so I could sample some of what his wife would do with those K rations. And she'd make them pretty good. Then I learned about this little gal that they had with them. She was a little orphan girl. Her parents had been killed up in Normandy, and she was their niece. Her name was Louisette.
Battling in the area for several weeks, on the eve of October 27, 1944, American troops heard explosions in the town of Sospel. The next morning, the silence was suspicious.
Because it was awfully quiet, strangely quiet. And Juki took a patrol down into Sospel and found that they had completely pulled out.
So we got orders to lead E Company and parts of D Company down into the valley and up into Sospel. We were billeted in that command quarters, the German command quarters, that night with the company of E and some of D. And I remember going through with the lieutenant who was in charge of E Company, that we looked for that buildings, looked for a booby trap in the whole building, and we never found any. So we stayed with them, Merle and me, on the second floor of this German command building. It was a chalet, it was plush furniture and grand piano in it and all that. So we stayed with them that night, and then we left in the morning to meet the rest of our F company coming into Sospel from another area. Well, we got about a block away, and we heard this explosion behind us. And here that building, that chalet, went up in a cloud of smoke. And we couldn't figure out what happened, but I will never forget. We got there, and guys were screaming, and had fallen in with all that debris, and oh, it was just chaos. And I think there were about 4 that were killed in that, and here again, we could have been killed right there. I'm telling you, it was devastating.
Sospel had been under a reign of German terror for months. It was the last French city to be liberated. Why the Germans gave up the area is unknown. It was not due to American pressure. The enemy withdrawal was possibly related to a coming offensive.
When they learned that we were going to leave that area and go up to Reims, northern France, for a rest camp, they wanted my wings, and they wanted to take them to the priest and have them blessed. I found this medal of St. Christopher, the patron saint, which is here, which is soldered to the back here. I don't know if you can see that or not. And on the back of it, I was surprised to see the name of Louisette inscribed on the back of this. And that kind of got to me, I have to admit. And I wore those wings for the rest of my tour of duty. There have been occasions where I wondered if it weren't these wings and that medal, that's the reason I'm still here.
And of course the mission was for us to stop them from reinforcing Italy, to stop them from reinforcing the beachhead. And that was our basic mission, and we accomplished it, but it took a long time. And almost everybody in the organization was a casualty of one form or another.